Come, let us travel back through the quiet corridors of time to a world that feels both distant and strangely familiar. Settle in and allow your mind to drift upon the gentle currents of history to a single evening suspended in the vast, dark velvet of the North Atlantic. There is nothing to do now but to breathe and to listen as we find ourselves approaching a night of serene elegance, a night of quiet confidence, aboard the grandest ship the world had ever known. We are not here to recount a tragedy, but rather to softly revisit the peaceful, forgotten hours before the story changed forever. A time of tranquil normalcy, when a magnificent vessel sailed on under a brilliant canopy of stars. On the 14th of April, in the year 1912, a true titan of the sea moved silently through the calm, frigid waters. This was the Titanic, a name that did not yet carry the weight of history, but instead resonated with the sound of human achievement, a testament to an age of boundless optimism. She was a city of light, a floating palace 4 city blocks long, gliding through the profound darkness with an almost imperceptible hum from her massive engines deep below. From a distance, her endless rows of glowing portholes would have looked like a fallen constellation, a warm and welcoming galaxy adrift on a sea as smooth and dark as polished obsidian. The ship itself was a masterpiece of engineering and artistry, its immense black hull rising from the water like a sleek, dark cliff, crowned by 4 colossal funnels that stood like sentinels against the star-dusted sky. This was her maiden voyage, her grand debut upon the world stage, and she was performing her role with flawless, quiet grace. This vessel was the ultimate expression of its era, a time of peace and prosperity, when technology seemed to promise a future free from the old-world limitations of the past. The Titanic was more than a ship. It was a symbol, a declaration in steel and steam that humanity was on a confident upward trajectory. Within its ornate walls, the world was perfectly ordered, a microcosm of society's grandest aspirations. It held the marvels of the modern age: electric elevators, a heated swimming pool, a state-of-the-art wireless station that could send messages across the ocean, and interiors so lavish they rivaled the finest hotels in London or New York. For those aboard, especially the many American families returning home or seeking new beginnings, she represented the pinnacle of safety and luxury, a seamless, worry-free bridge between 2 continents. The very idea of peril seemed a relic of a less sophisticated time, something this modern marvel had simply engineered away into obsolescence. The evening itself was one of profound and unusual stillness. The ocean, so often a force of untamable power, lay placid and serene, a vast dark mirror reflecting the cold, distant light of the stars. There was no moon to illuminate the seascape, only the diamond-sharp clarity of the cosmos, so brilliant in the absence of any earthly light. The air was crisp and biting, a clean, sharp cold that reminded anyone who stepped out onto the decks of the immense natural world that surrounded their warm, man-made haven. This deep, unrippled calm, later described by survivors as being like a sea of glass, made the ship's steady progress feel all the more effortless, all the more dreamlike. It was as if the great liner was not sailing upon water at all, but gliding through a silent, motionless dream, the only sound being the soft sigh of her own passage and the faint, rhythmic pulse of her powerful heart. Inside this unsuspecting giant, the rhythms of a peaceful Sunday evening were gently winding down. The grand dinners had concluded, the fine china and crystal had been cleared away, and the lingering notes of the orchestra's final waltz were fading into memory. A quietude was beginning to settle over the ship, the contented hush of a day well spent. Muted laughter might still echo from the warmth of the first-class smoking room, while in other corners of the immense vessel, families were tucking their children into bed, entirely secure in their floating world. The atmosphere was one of deep and abiding peace, a feeling of being completely insulated from any and all concerns, cocooned in a bubble of Edwardian elegance and comfort. The world outside, with its icy waters and profound emptiness, felt 1,000,000 miles away, a distant abstraction that could not possibly touch the warmth and life that pulsed within. And so, let us remain in this tranquil moment for a while, in this final, unassuming evening of a world on the cusp of change. We will walk these quiet decks together, not with the urgency of knowing what is to come, but with the gentle curiosity of a visitor stepping into a perfectly preserved memory. This is a journey into the heart of a peaceful night at sea, a slow, unfolding story of ordinary people living an extraordinary moment, though they did not yet know it. We will explore the quiet confidence, the simple routines, and the gentle dreams that filled the air in those last hours of innocence. There is no need to rush toward the dawn. Instead, let the soft, steady rhythm of the ship guide your thoughts as we drift into the heart of this forgotten night. A night when the grandest ship in the world sailed calmly, quietly, and unsuspectingly toward its destiny. That Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, the light spreading slowly across a sea of deepest indigo. On board the Titanic, the day unfolded with the quiet and predictable rhythm of a small, self-contained world, a world governed by the gentle hum of the engines and the distant, soothing sigh of the ocean. This was a day for rest, for quiet contemplation, and for the simple, unhurried pleasures of a life at sea. The routine was a comfort in itself, a testament to the well-ordered universe that the great ship represented, moving through the vast, empty wilderness of the North Atlantic. For the passengers, the day stretched before them like an open book, its pages filled with leisure and contentment, far from the bustling demands of the lives they had left on shore. In the early hours, while many still slept soundly in their berths, some of the more energetic souls were already embracing the day. Among them was the notable American historian and writer, Colonel Archibald Gracie, Archibald Gracie, a man of disciplined habits, even while on holiday. He began his morning, as he always did, with a vigorous session on the squash court, the sharp echo of the ball a lonely, percussive beat deep within the vessel's steel heart. From there, he made his way to the state-of-the-art gymnasium, where he and a few other gentlemen took turns on the mechanical horses and rowing machines, curious contraptions of the new century, designed to replicate earthly exertions while adrift at sea. His routine culminated in a visit to the magnificent heated saltwater pool, a true wonder of the ship, its turquoise water a warm and welcoming oasis, a stark and pleasant contrast to the icy reality of the ocean just inches of steel away. It was a morning of familiar, personal rituals enacted in extraordinary surroundings. As the day progressed, a sense of leisurely Sunday calm settled over the entire vessel. The weather was generally fine, the sun casting a bright, if not particularly warm light across the decks. A strong, persistent northwest wind swept across the open spaces of the boat deck, its bracing chill encouraging most passengers to seek the comfort of the enclosed promenades. Here, behind great panes of glass, one could sit in a comfortable deck chair, wrapped in a thick woolen blanket provided by a steward, and watch the endless horizon glide by in perfect, sheltered peace. It was a day for writing letters home on the elegant White Star Line stationery, for losing oneself in a novel from the ship's well-stocked library, or for simply dozing in the gentle, rocking cradle of the ship's motion. Later that morning, in the first-class dining saloon, a church service was held, the familiar hymns rising and falling with the deep, resonant pulse of the ship's engines, a sound so constant it had become a form of silence. It was in this atmosphere of serene tranquility that a small, seemingly insignificant decision was made. Each Sunday, it was customary for the ship's crew to conduct a lifeboat drill, a routine exercise to ensure readiness and to familiarize everyone with the procedures. However, on this particular Sunday, Captain Smith, perhaps wishing to preserve the peaceful, uninterrupted repose of his passengers and crew, chose to cancel the drill. It was a footnote in the day's log, a minor deviation from the schedule that went entirely unnoticed by the hundreds of passengers enjoying their leisurely pursuits. In the context of this magnificent, unsinkable ship, gliding so smoothly upon a sea of glass, the drill seemed a mere formality, a relic of a more cautious time that this vessel had supposedly transcended. And so, the lifeboats remained still and silent under their canvas covers, their purpose for now purely decorative, their potential urgency a thought that never once troubled the placid surface of the day. The afternoon drifted by in much the same way as the morning, a slow and peaceful procession of quiet hours. Second-class passengers gathered for a hymn sing-along, their voices a gentle and harmonious chorus of contentment. In third class, children played on the poop deck, their laughter carried away by the sharp wind, while their parents dreamed of the new lives that awaited them in America, a land of promise that felt closer with every steady turn of the propellers. The day was marked not by grand events, but by the accumulation of these small, peaceful moments, a shared cup of tea, a friendly game of cards, a polite nod between strangers strolling the deck. It was the epitome of a day of rest, a perfect and complete escape from the ordinary world, a floating sanctuary of calm and order. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the quality of the light began to change, shifting from the bright clarity of midday to a softer, more golden hue. A new feeling, a quiet sense of anticipation, began to ripple through the ship's gentle atmosphere. The day's leisure was drawing to a close, and the passengers' thoughts began to turn toward the evening ahead. Stewards moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the grand public rooms for the night's social affairs. The soft, distant sound of the ship's orchestra tuning their instruments could just be faintly heard, a prelude to the elegance to come. The day of rest and routine was fading, its peaceful rhythms giving way to the promise of a night of fine dining, pleasant conversation, and the soft, sophisticated glamour that was the hallmark of a first-class Atlantic crossing. As dusk began to settle over the North Atlantic, casting a soft, deep blue light upon the calm sea, a quiet but profound transformation was taking place within the most exclusive corridors of the Titanic. The leisurely repose of the day was gently receding, replaced by the hushed and meticulous rituals of preparation for the evening. In the magnificent first-class suites, some of the wealthiest and most influential figures of the era began the elaborate process of dressing for dinner, a nightly ceremony that was as much about social expression as it was about personal attire. This was the social stratosphere, a world of immense privilege and quiet confidence, where every detail was curated and every appearance was a carefully crafted statement of one's place in the highly ordered hierarchy of the Gilded Age. The air in these staterooms was thick with the scent of French perfume and fine soaps, a fragrant cloud that mingled with the faint, pleasant smell of wood polish and sea air. For the ladies, this was a time-honored ritual, often performed with the expert assistance of a personal maid who moved with quiet, practiced hands. Corsets were laced, creating the fashionable and statuesque silhouette of the time, a foundation upon which the evening's finery would be built. Gowns of silk, satin, and delicate lace were carefully lifted from traveling trunks, their rich fabrics shimmering softly in the warm electric light of the cabins. These were dresses of breathtaking artistry, adorned with intricate beadwork, delicate embroidery, and cascades of shimmering pearls, each one a testament to the couture houses of Paris and London. The process was slow, deliberate, and meditative. A quiet transformation from the day's comfortable tweeds to the evening's prescribed splendor. The gentlemen, too, observed their own set of sartorial rules, preparing for the evening with a more subdued, yet no less exacting precision. Tuxedos of the finest black wool were donned, their lapels faced with gleaming silk. Stiffly starched white shirts were fastened with studs of gold or mother of pearl, and crisp white bow ties were meticulously knotted by hand or with the aid of a valet. It was a uniform of quiet, masculine elegance, a symbol of their status as titans of industry, finance, and society. Among these distinguished figures was Colonel John Jacob Astor IV, arguably the wealthiest man on the ship, returning to America with his young, expectant wife, Madeleine, Mad Ulin. Their presence added a particular luster to the passenger list, a touch of American royalty that fascinated their fellow travelers and embodied the immense wealth and influence concentrated in this floating palace. Once dressed, these paragons of society would not proceed directly to dinner, for the evening had its own gentle, unwritten schedule. The next stop was the majestic reception room, a vast and opulent space designed specifically for this pre-dinner mingling. It was a vision of palatial splendor, with intricately carved whitewood paneling, deep, comfortable armchairs upholstered in rich fabrics, and a grand, sweeping staircase that seemed to invite a dramatic entrance. Here, against the backdrop of a softly playing string quartet, the elite of 2 continents would gather. Conversations were held in low, discreet tones. A discussion of stock prices in New York, a shared reminiscence of a recent holiday on the French Riviera, a polite inquiry about one's family. It was a world of quiet connections, where business and society were inextricably linked, and where being seen in the right company was a subtle but essential art form. This was the domain of families like the Wideners of Philadelphia, whose vast fortune was built on streetcars, and the Thayers, another prominent family from the same city, whose wealth stemmed from the Pennsylvania Railroad. They, along with other American industrial tycoons and European aristocrats, formed the glittering core of the ship's first-class society. The atmosphere was not one of overt, showy extravagance, but rather one of deep and unshakable confidence. They were the masters of this universe, comfortable in their privilege, and utterly secure in the solid, predictable world they had built. The ship itself was a perfect reflection of their own lives, grand, orderly, and seemingly impervious to the chaotic forces of the outside world. Their conversations were light, their smiles were genuine, and their sense of well-being was absolute. As the clock ticked closer to the dinner hour, the gentle hum of conversation in the reception room would begin to swell slightly, a subtle crescendo of anticipation. The orchestra's music became a little more pronounced, and the stewards moved with an even more heightened sense of purpose, their white gloves a stark contrast against the dark wood and rich upholstery. The great doors to the dining saloon, still closed, stood as a silent promise of the culinary delights that awaited them. Having performed the vital social ritual of the pre-dinner gathering, the passengers began to drift, in small, elegant groups, toward those doors. Their slow, graceful procession was like a river of silk and diamonds, flowing inexorably toward the very heart of the ship's evening elegance, a room where the final, grandest act of this peaceful Sunday was about to unfold. At the appointed hour, the grand panelled doors to the first-class dining saloon swung silently open, revealing a scene of truly breathtaking splendor. The room was immense, the largest of its kind on any ship in the world, a vast chamber of Jacobean elegance that stretched nearly the full width of the vessel. Its walls were panelled in soft, lustrous white, intricately carved and providing a gentle contrast to the deep plush carpets underfoot. The entire space was bathed in a warm, diffused glow from hundreds of electric lights, which shimmered and danced upon a seemingly endless ocean of sparkling crystal glasses and polished silver. Each table was a pristine island of white linen, set with the finest china, bearing the delicate red flag of the White Star Line. And underneath it all, a gentle, soothing melody from the ship's orchestra provided a soft, melodic foundation for the quiet hum of sophisticated conversation. The meal that followed was not merely dinner, it was a culinary symphony, a 10-course journey designed to delight the most discerning palates of the age. It began with the light, expectant flavors of the sea itself, delicate canapes and freshly shucked oysters, served ice-cold, their subtle brininess a perfect prelude to the richness that would follow. Then came the soups, a choice between a clear, amber consommé olga, garnished with sturgeon marrow, or a thick, comforting cream of barley. Each spoonful was a testament to the skill of the chefs working deep within the ship, a silent army of artisans dedicated to creating this nightly masterpiece. The passengers savored each course with unhurried grace, their conversations flowing as smoothly and effortlessly as the fine wines being poured by the attentive white-gloved stewards. At a special table, situated in a place of honor, sat the ship's master, Captain Edward John Smith. Tonight, he was the guest of a private party hosted by the esteemed George Widener, and his elegant wife, Eleanor. It was a gesture of respect for the beloved, white-bearded commander on his final voyages before a planned retirement. The conversation at this table was, like elsewhere in the room, light and congenial. It touched upon the remarkable smoothness of the journey, the marvels of the ship itself, and the pleasantries of high society. The captain, a man of quiet dignity, seemed perfectly at ease in this opulent setting, a calm and reassuring presence at the heart of his magnificent floating kingdom. For the Wideners and their other guests, which included their son Harry and the prominent Philadelphian John B. Thayer, it was simply the pinnacle of a perfect Sunday at sea, an unforgettable meal with an honored guest, entirely enveloped in an atmosphere of profound security and contentment. As the evening deepened, the culinary procession continued its majestic, unhurried march. A course of poached salmon arrived, draped in a delicate mousseline sauce, followed by the rich, hearty centerpiece of the feast, exquisite filet mignons lily seared to perfection, and a succulent roast duckling, its skin crisp, served with a sweet and tangy applesauce. Halfway through this grand feast, a moment of delightful pause arrived in the form of punch romaine, a cool, lemon and rum-infused sorbet served in a tall, slender glass. It was designed to cleanse the palate, a bright, icy intermission that prepared the senses for the final savory courses, including a tender roast squab served simply with watercress, followed by cool, crisp asparagus spears drizzled in a sharp vinaigrette. It was a meal of such scope and artistry that it felt less like sustenance and more like a celebration of civilization itself. Finally, as the main courses gave way to the sweet conclusion of the evening, the atmosphere in the grand saloon softened into one of deep, sated tranquility. Trays of intricate French pastries appeared, including delicate chocolate and vanilla eclairs, alongside a creamy Waldorf pudding and beautiful peaches suspended in Chartreuse jelly. A final offering of assorted fresh fruits and a selection of fine cheeses provided a gentle, lingering end to the feast. The conversations grew quieter now, more intimate, the diners suffused with a sense of complete well-being. The orchestra played its final, gentle melodies as coffee and cigars were offered, a signal that this magnificent ritual was drawing to its peaceful close. For 2 serene hours, this room had been the center of the world for those within it, a warm, bright haven of order and elegance, blissfully unaware of the immense, cold darkness that lay just beyond its glowing windows. Slowly, gracefully, the passengers began to rise from their tables. The soft rustle of silk gowns and the low murmur of polite good nights filled the air as the diners began to disperse. Some would make their way to the adjoining reception room for a final digestive. Others would ascend the grand staircase toward the veranda cafe or retreat to the masculine sanctuary of the smoking room for a late-night brandy. The great dining saloon began to empty, its warm light falling upon tables that were now a beautiful, orderly landscape of discarded napkins and empty wine glasses. And as the last of the first-class passengers departed, leaving this bastion of luxury to the quiet efficiency of the stewards, the life of the great ship continued elsewhere, in other spaces where the evening was still alive with more modest, yet equally contented gatherings. While the grand pageant of the first-class dinner unfolded in its own exclusive sphere, another, more modest but no less pleasant evening was taking place one deck below. Here, in the second-class dining saloon, the atmosphere was not one of palatial grandeur, but of comfortable, respectable elegance. The room was handsome and bright, panelled in fine, light-coloured oak and lit by glowing lamps that cast a warm, inviting glow upon the diners. The passengers in second class were a diverse collection of professionals, academics, clergy, and middle-class families. People of substance and learning, for whom the journey was still a significant event, but one experienced with a more grounded, communal spirit. Their world was one of solid comfort, a satisfying and thoroughly pleasant environment that mirrored the quality of many fine hotels on land. The evening meal in second class was, in itself, a substantial and impressive affair, a testament to the high standards upheld by the White Star Line across the entire ship. While it did not possess the sprawling 10-course complexity of the first-class menu, it was a feast by any normal measure, offering a satisfying array of well-prepared dishes. The dinner began with a hearty consommé, its warm, savoury aroma filling the saloon. This was followed by a choice of entrees that spoke of solid, comforting fare, flaky baked haddock served with a sharp caper sauce, a flavourful curried chicken with rice, tender spring lamb in a delicate mint sauce, or a satisfying roast turkey with cranberry. It was a menu designed to please, to provide a sense of abundance and well-being, and it succeeded beautifully. The social dynamic here was distinctly different from the quiet, formal reserve of the decks above. The tables were longer, more communal, and the conversations were more open and spirited. Laughter was more frequent, a warm and genuine sound that echoed pleasantly in the handsome room. Here, strangers became acquaintances with greater ease, sharing stories of their homes, their professions, and their reasons for travel. A schoolteacher from England might find himself deep in conversation with a mining engineer headed for Idaho, their shared experience on this magnificent vessel creating a temporary, but very real, bond. It was a friendly and contented community, a microcosm of the respectable, hard-working middle class, and their satisfaction with the ship and its amenities was palpable. They were enjoying a level of luxury that, for many, was a wonderful new experience, and their appreciation filled the room with a quiet, happy energy. After the dinner concluded, with its satisfying courses of plum pudding and American ice cream, many of the second-class passengers did not immediately disperse to private cabins or secluded lounges. Instead, they gravitated toward the handsome second-class library, a comfortable and inviting space that also served as the general room. Here, amidst comfortable armchairs and shelves of books, a cherished evening ritual began to take shape. With a gentleman named Mr. Weir at the piano, a spontaneous hymn sing-along commenced, a tradition that had taken root over the past few nights of the voyage. The familiar, soothing melodies of hymns like "Eternal Father, strong to save," rose in a gentle, harmonious chorus, the voices of men, women, and children blending together in a sound of pure communal peace. The music was not a performance. It was a shared experience, a quiet expression of gratitude and contentment that resonated deeply in the calm, steady heart of the ship. For those who participated, it was a moment of profound tranquility, a simple and beautiful act of community that stood in stark contrast to the vast, empty, and silent ocean that surrounded them. The gentle rise and fall of their voices created a pocket of warmth and fellowship, a sanctuary of shared faith and simple feeling, floating in the middle of the immense, dark sea. It was a sound of absolute peace, the gentle, hopeful music of a community at rest, entirely secure in their sturdy, well-ordered world. As the final, lingering notes of the last hymn faded into a contented silence, a sense of deep and peaceful closure settled upon the room. The hour was growing later, and the singers began to quietly take their leave, offering soft good nights to their newfound friends. The children, their eyes heavy with sleep, were gently guided away to their berths by their parents. The library slowly emptied, its warm lights now falling on vacant chairs, the lingering spirit of the music a gentle, invisible presence in the quieted room. This contented calm, this feeling of a day peacefully concluded and a community gently bonded, was the defining essence of the second-class experience. And as this peaceful chorus faded into the memory of the evening, a far more vibrant and energetic pulse of life was still beating strong in another, even more populous part of the great ship. Far from the hushed velvets of the upper decks, and deeper within the steady beating heart of the great vessel, a different kind of life was unfolding. A life animated not by quiet luxury, but by a vibrant, powerful, and irrepressible current of human hope. Here, in the clean, bright, and functional spaces designated for the third-class passengers, the evening was not winding down, but was instead reaching its joyful, energetic peak. This was the world of steerage, a name that belied the immense dignity and spirit of the people it held. For them, the Titanic was not a floating hotel. It was a grand and miraculous bridge, a passage from an old world of limitations to a new world of boundless promise, and every moment aboard was a part of that incredible, life-altering journey. The third-class general room was the vibrant center of this world, a large, simple space with long wooden tables and benches that had been scrubbed clean and were now filled with the sound of many languages mingling together. The dinner, that had been served here earlier, was not a multi-course spectacle, but it was a meal of simple, honest, and nourishing abundance. There was hearty vegetable soup and freshly baked bread, roasted pork with a savory sage and onion stuffing, and piles of boiled potatoes. For these travelers, many of whom had known lean times, this was a feast in itself, a welcome and reassuring taste of the prosperity they were sailing toward. The meal was a communal affair, a time for sharing food and stories, a time for forging the quick and sturdy bonds that form between people who share a common, powerful dream. As the evening deepened, the character of the room transformed. The remnants of the meal were cleared away, and a space was made in the center of the floor. From somewhere in the crowd, the lively, spirited sound of a fiddle or a set of pipes would emerge, its cheerful notes cutting through the low hum of conversation like a spark of joyful fire. This was the signal. Soon, the infectious rhythm of a reel or a jig would fill the room, and the floor would come alive with the steady, joyful stomp of heavy boots and the swirl of simple woolen skirts. This was not the restrained, choreographed dancing of the first-class ballroom. This was a dance of pure, uninhibited celebration, a physical expression of the hope and excitement that filled their hearts. The room was a rich and beautiful tapestry of humanity, a mosaic of cultures and experiences woven together by a single powerful thread, the dream of a better life in America. There were large Irish families, their laughter echoing with the musical lilt of their homeland, their eyes already looking past the horizon to Boston or New York. There were stoic Scandinavian farmers, drawn by the promise of vast, open land in the Midwest, their quiet smiles filled with a steady, determined optimism. There were people from the Levant, their conversations a melodic flow of Arabic, carrying with them the ancient traditions of their homelands as they sailed toward a modern future. They were all so different, and yet, in this moment, they were one community, a single body of hopeful souls, united by the shared rhythm of the music and the gentle, constant pulse of the ship beneath their feet. The atmosphere was thick with this shared optimism. It was a tangible presence in the warm, crowded room. The light from the simple electric fixtures gleamed on flushed, happy faces, and the air was filled with the mixed scents of pipe tobacco, damp wool, and the simple, clean smell of the sea. For these passengers, the relative austerity of their surroundings was of no consequence. They had been given clean berths, nourishing food, and a safe passage on the greatest ship in the world. This journey was, for many, the single greatest expenditure of their lives, a massive investment in a future they could only imagine. And so, this night was a celebration of that investment, a joyful and defiant declaration that their gamble would pay off, that the new life awaiting them would be everything they dreamed it would be. But even the most vibrant celebration must eventually find its gentle end. As the hour grew later, the music began to soften, the dancing slowed, and the lively energy of the room began to quiet. Mothers, seeing the heavy eyes of their children, began to gather them up, whispering to them in their native tongues as they guided them back toward the quiet dormitories and the promise of sleep. The authorities of the ship maintained a schedule, and at the appointed hour, the bright overhead lights of the general room were dimmed, a gentle, official signal that the communal part of the day was over. The room, once so full of life and sound, began to empty, its lingering warmth a testament to the joy it had held. And as the great common room emptied into a hushed and shadowed space, the women and children retiring to their berths, the men, not yet ready to surrender the night, drifted toward another room, seeking a final hour of quiet camaraderie. As a quiet hush settled over the grand dining saloons and lively common areas, the social life of the Titanic did not end, but rather it retreated into sanctuaries of a different sort. Following the deeply ingrained customs of the era, the sexes largely separated after dinner, the ladies retiring to the elegant reading rooms or their private suites, while the gentlemen made their way to the smoky, masculine comfort of the smoking rooms. These were spaces dedicated to quiet conversation, strong drink, and the contemplative ritual of a fine cigar or a well-packed pipe. Each class had its own version of this retreat, and each was a perfect reflection of the men who sought refuge within its walls for a final, peaceful hour before bed. High up on the A deck, nestled toward the stern of the ship, was the magnificent first-class smoking room. It was a space designed to impress, a true masterpiece of maritime interior design. The room was a dark and peaceful haven, panelled from floor to ceiling in rich, lustrous mahogany, its deep, reddish-brown tones inlaid with intricate pieces of mother-of-pearl that caught the soft electric light with a gentle, iridescent gleam. The floor was covered in rich blue and red linoleum tiles, and stained glass windows, illuminated from behind, cast a soft, jeweled glow upon the comfortable leather armchairs. Here, in these deep, embracing chairs, the titans of industry and finance would gather in small, discreet groups, their conversations a low, confident murmur beneath a slowly rising haze of blue-grey smoke. This was a room that felt more like a private, exclusive London club than a space aboard a ship. Stewards moved with silent, almost invisible efficiency, taking orders for brandy, whiskey, and coffee, their presence a quiet hum of perfect service. The air was thick with the rich, aromatic scent of expensive Cuban cigars, a fragrance that seemed to soak into the very wood of the walls. It was here that business was often quietly discussed. The day's stock market closings, relayed by the ship's wireless, were analyzed, and political maneuverings were debated with the easy authority of men who were accustomed to shaping the world. At some tables, quiet but intense games of bridge or poker were underway, the soft snap of the cards, the only sharp sound in the otherwise muted atmosphere. It was a world of immense power, held in a state of tranquil after-dinner repose, a final peaceful council of kings before they retired to their staterooms. Far below this bastion of quiet opulence, another, more boisterous but no less important ritual was taking place in the third-class smoking room. This space was simpler, more functional, but it served the same essential purpose. The room was furnished with sturdy oak tables and long, comfortable benches. The paneling was of simple painted pine, and the floor was tiled for easy cleaning. But what the room lacked in luxury, it more than made up for in warmth and vibrant camaraderie. Here, the air was thick with the more pungent, earthy smells of pipe tobacco and hand-rolled cigarettes, and the sound was not a low murmur, but a lively and engaging mix of conversation, storytelling, and occasional bursts of hearty laughter. This was a space for the working man to unwind, a place to find fellowship and a sense of shared experience far from home. The conversations here were not of stocks and politics, but of the harvest in Sweden, the craft of a carpenter in England, or the best route to take to find family in the sprawling boroughs of New York City. Stories were told, tall tales from back home, and hopeful speculations about the new lives that were just over the horizon. Card games were played here too, but they were often louder, more animated affairs, fueled by glasses of inexpensive ale drawn from the adjoining bar. It was a place of easy, unpretentious fellowship, a vital and necessary retreat where men from a dozen different countries could find common ground and forge a sense of community in the shared, simple pleasure of a quiet smoke and a final friendly conversation at the end of a long day. In these two separate, distinct worlds, the men of the Titanic wound down their evening. Both rooms, in their own way, were peaceful havens, insulated from the rest of the ship and from the vast, dark ocean outside. They were bubbles of warm, smoky light, floating in the immense cold darkness. For a few final, tranquil hours, the cares of the world, both past and future, were held at bay by the simple, time-honored rituals of masculine society. It was a shared, collective exhalation, a moment of peaceful pause before the ship fell into its deepest and most profound slumber. And as the last of the card games concluded and the final cigars were extinguished, these quiet, smoky retreats would empty, their occupants heading for their beds, leaving the great ship to the care of the only men who would remain awake and on duty, the silent watchers on the bridge. While the last of the passengers settled into their berths and the great, vibrant vessel slowly succumbed to a deep and peaceful slumber, the mind of the ship remained awake, alert and watchful. This was the bridge, the nerve center of the Titanic, a quiet, darkened space at the very front of the officers' quarters, offering a commanding panoramic view of the immense dark sea ahead. Here there was no music, no laughter, and no opulent decor, only the quiet professional hum of a ship operating at peak efficiency. The atmosphere was one of serene, focused routine, the calm professionalism of men who were masters of their craft, guiding their magnificent charge through the vast, silent emptiness of the night. At 10 o'clock, the ship's bell chimed the hour, its clear metallic tone marking the formal change of the watch. Second Officer Charles Lightoller, his duty complete, handed over command of the bridge to the steady and capable first officer, William Murdoch, Murdoch. The transfer was a seamless and practiced ritual, a quiet exchange of information about the ship's speed, its course, and the prevailing conditions. The night, as Lightoller reported, was exceptionally clear and fine, the sky above a brilliant, star-dusted canopy, and the sea below. Unusually, profoundly calm. Murdoch, a seasoned and highly respected officer, took his position, his familiar presence a reassuring sight to the other junior officers and quartermasters on duty. The ship was in good hands, proceeding smoothly at a confident speed of over 21 knots, eating up the miles toward her destination in New York. The most remarkable feature of the night was this extraordinary stillness of the ocean. Experienced sailors knew that such a calm, often referred to as a sea of glass, was a rare and strangely beautiful phenomenon. But it was also a condition that carried with it a subtle, hidden danger. On a normal night, even a gentle swell would cause waves to break against the base of a distant iceberg, creating a faint, telltale line of white phosphorescence that a keen-eyed lookout could spot from miles away. But tonight, there were no waves. The sea was a flat, dark, and unreflective mirror, and any object floating in it would be rendered almost invisible, its edges swallowed by the profound and seamless blackness of the water and the moonless sky. This placid beauty, so serene and peaceful to an observer, was, in fact, a veil, masking the true nature of the waters they were now entering. Adding to this subtle challenge was another small, seemingly minor detail, a loose thread in the otherwise perfectly woven fabric of the ship's operations. The pair of binoculars, intended for the lookouts high above in the crow's nest, were not in their designated box. They were, in fact, locked away in a cabin, their key inadvertently carried off the ship by an officer who had been reassigned at the last minute in Southampton. No one on the bridge gave this oversight much thought. Lookouts had relied on their own sharp eyesight for centuries, and on a night this clear, it was not deemed a critical issue. It was just another small, innocuous detail in a night filled with routine, a minor inconvenience that would only later, in the unforgiving clarity of hindsight, be seen as a crucial and missing piece of a developing puzzle. For now, however, the mood on the bridge remained one of quiet, professional calm. The officers went about their duties with a practiced and unhurried efficiency. They checked the ship's heading, monitored the glowing compass in the binnacle, and made small, precise adjustments to the telemotor to keep the great liner perfectly on its westward course. The only sounds were the soft creak of the ship's superstructure, the low, respectful tones of the officers' voices, and the faint, almost imperceptible hum of the telegraph, which stood ready to relay their commands to the engine room deep below. There was no sense of alarm, no feeling of impending dread. The numerous ice warnings that had been received earlier in the day had been noted, but they had not created undue concern. Encountering ice was a known, if unwelcome, part of a springtime Atlantic crossing. They were simply proceeding with caution, trusting in the diligence of their lookouts and the sheer, magnificent resilience of their vessel. And so, from this calm and quiet command center, the great ship continued its relentless push westward, a solitary universe of light and warmth ploughing through an immense and silent darkness. The officers on the bridge, custodians of the thousands of souls sleeping peacefully behind them, stood their watch, their eyes scanning the dark horizon. They were confident in their ship, in their crew, and in the established routines that had governed safe maritime travel for decades. Their focus was now turning outward and upward, to the highest, most isolated outpost on the ship, a small, exposed perch where two men were tasked with the sole, critical responsibility of looking, of watching, and of being the first to see what lay hidden in the deep, deceptive stillness of the night ahead. high above the warm, sleeping world of the ship, suspended between the cold, diamond-sharp stars and the deep, silent ocean, was a small, lonely outpost. This was the crow's nest, a simple, open-topped barrel fixed high upon the forward mast, reached by a long, cold climb up a steel ladder set into the mast itself. Here, 100 feet above the sea, the gentle, reassuring hum of the ship's life faded into a distant memory, replaced by the immense, overwhelming presence of the natural world. At 10 o'clock, 2 men, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, had made that climb, taking their place as the silent watchers, the forward eyes of the great liner. Their world for the next 2 hours would be one of profound isolation, a universe composed of only 3 things: the rushing wind, the endless sea, and the vast, silent, and watchful night. The cold up here was a physical presence, a thing far more intense and penetrating than the crisp air on the decks below. It was a deep, biting cold, born of the ship's relentless speed through the frigid April air, a constant 21-knot wind that was purely of the vessel's own making. It seeped through the thick wool of their heavy bridge coats, chilling them to the bone, and it brought tears to their eyes, which they constantly had to wipe away to keep their vision clear. The darkness was absolute, a profound and seemingly infinite blackness that was only intensified by the brilliance of the stars above. With no moon to cast a gentle, silvery light upon the scene, the horizon became an almost imperceptible line, a place where the star-dusted velvet of the sky met the flat, ink-black velvet of the sea. Their task was one of immense and singular importance: to stare, without pause, into that deep and deceptive darkness. They were searching for anything that did not belong: the distant light of another vessel, a patch of haze, or the one thing they had been explicitly warned about: ice. Yet, the very conditions that made the night so beautifully clear also made their job impossibly difficult. The placid, glassy surface of the ocean refused to create the telltale white breakers at the base of an iceberg, the very signal that a lookout would most rely upon. And so they were forced to search for a negative, for a shape that was merely blacker than the surrounding blackness, a subtle interruption in the pattern of the stars. They strained their naked eyes, peering into the gloom until their vision blurred, wishing for the pair of binoculars that they knew would have made their vital task just a little less daunting. For a long while, the 2 men stood in a shared, professional silence, their bodies braced against the gentle, rhythmic sway of the mast. But as the minutes stretched on, a quiet conversation began, their words spoken in low tones, almost snatched away by the constant rush of the wind. They spoke of the piercing cold, and of the unusual, unnatural calm of the sea. They scanned the horizon for any sign of an ice blink, that faint, pale shimmer in the sky that sometimes reflects the presence of a large ice field. But the heavens remained stubbornly black. A quiet sense of unease began to creep into their watch. They were experienced seamen, and they knew they were sailing at a tremendous speed into a region of the ocean where ice had been repeatedly reported. This was not fear, but a heightened sense of professional tension, a feeling that they were the sole defense against a danger that was both invisible and drawing nearer with every turn of the ship's powerful propellers. Time seemed to slow, each minute stretching longer than the last. The great ship below them continued its confident, unthinking charge into the west, a silent, sleeping giant, wholly dependent on the 2 pairs of tired, aching eyes in this small, windswept perch. Fleet, the more experienced of the 2, continued his relentless scan, his gaze sweeping from right to left and back again, a practiced, hypnotic rhythm. His eyes passed over the familiar, star-dusted darkness, once, twice, a dozen times. And then, something. It was not a sight at first, but a feeling, a subtle perception that a patch of the horizon directly ahead was somehow different. It was a spot where the stars were not. A small, indistinct patch of deeper blackness against the slightly less black field of the night sky. He blinked, the cold air stinging his eyes, and looked again. It was still there, and it was growing. That small patch of nothing was becoming a shape, a low, dark mass, rising silently from the dark water. And in one heart-stopping, crystalline moment of horror, Frederick Fleet understood what he was seeing. It was a mountain of ice, and it was dead ahead. As Frederick Fleet stared in dawning horror at the dark shape looming from the sea, a different kind of watch was being kept in a small, soundproofed room on the Titanic's boat deck. This was the Marconi wireless room, a marvel of the modern age, a space filled with the strange, otherworldly glow of vacuum tubes and the constant sharp crackle of electrical sparks. Here, amidst the complex machinery of mahogany and brass, sat two young men, senior wireless operator Jack Phillips and his junior, Harold Bride. They were the ears of the ship, capable of snatching voices from the empty air, their vital role to receive weather reports, navigate by celestial time signals, and, most importantly, to hear the warnings of other vessels. But on this night, the airwaves were filled with more than just official traffic. They were buzzing with the mundane personal messages of the wealthy first-class passengers, a relentless backlog of greetings, stock trades, and travel arrangements that had to be sent to shore. Throughout the day, a steady stream of warnings had crackled into Jack Phillips's headphones. Ships across the North Atlantic shipping lanes, the Coronia, the Baltic, the America, had all reported ice, their messages painting a clear and growing picture of a vast field of frozen danger drifting southward, directly into the Titanic's path. These messages were duly noted, and some were passed along to the bridge. But as the day wore on, the sheer volume of passenger traffic began to take its toll. The wireless equipment had broken down a day earlier, and Phillips, tired and overworked, was now single-mindedly focused on clearing the mountain of private telegrams that had piled up. The relentless pressure to send these messages, which earned revenue for the Marconi Company, began to overshadow the less urgent, non-revenue-generating task of relaying ice warnings. At approximately 9:40 in the evening, a particularly crucial and specific message came through the static. It was from the steamer Mesaba, Musa Buh, and its warning was chillingly precise. It reported seeing much heavy pack ice and a great number of large icebergs. And critically, it gave the exact coordinates of this massive ice field. This was not a general caution. It was a detailed, unambiguous report placing a significant and unavoidable barrier of ice directly in the Titanic's path. The message was received by Phillips, who, with his headphones pressed tightly to his ears and his hand flying across a notepad, saw the letters MSG at the top, the prefix for a master service gram, meaning it required the captain's direct attention. But in that moment, buried under the weight of his commercial traffic, and with the loud spark of his own transmitter filling the room, he saw the warning as just one more interruption. He jotted it down and placed it under a paperweight on his desk, intending to pass it along to the bridge when he had a moment. That moment never came. The final, fateful exchange occurred just over an hour later, at around 10:55. Not far away, another ship, the Leyland liner SS Californian, had come to a complete stop. Its captain, Stanley Lord, having decided it was too dangerous to proceed. The Californian was now surrounded by ice. Its sole wireless operator, a man named Cyril Evans, tried to be helpful. He called the Titanic, his signal blasting into the room with deafening strength due to the ship's close proximity. He began, "I say, old man, we are stopped and surrounded by ice." Before he could relay any more information, he was cut off by a frustrated and weary Jack Phillips. "Shut up! Shut up!" Phillips transmitted back. "I am busy. I am working Cape Race." He was in the middle of sending his backlog of passenger telegrams to the powerful shore station at Cape Race, Newfoundland, and this loud interrupting signal from a nearby ship was, to his tired mind, merely an annoyance. Rebuffed and with his own duties for the day complete, Cyril Evans listened for a few moments longer. Then, at approximately 11:35 in the evening, he switched off his equipment, took off his headphones, and went to bed. At that precise moment, the Californian, the closest ship to the Titanic, and the one vessel that knew for certain the exact nature of the danger that lay just ahead, went silent. Its ears were closed. The last voice that could have offered a clear, final, and life-saving warning was gone, replaced by the quiet hum of dormant machinery. And so, an invisible, fragile chain of human communication, strained by fatigue and distraction, had finally broken. And thus, the stage was set for a tragedy of errors, a quiet confluence of missed opportunities and small, human failings. In the cold, dark emptiness of the North Atlantic, urgent, life-saving information crackled through the air, unheard or unheeded, while on the serene and unsuspecting decks of the great liner, passengers slept soundly in their beds, confident in the magnificent, unsinkable world that surrounded them. The chasm between the urgent reality of the static-filled warnings and the placid, dreamlike tranquility of the ship was now absolute. And into this profound and silent gap, the Titanic sailed on, its powerful engines pushing it steadily and irrevocably forward, toward a silent, waiting object that had been known, reported, and now, tragically, forgotten. For a few frozen, timeless seconds, Frederick Fleet could do nothing but stare at the dark mass that had suddenly materialized from the blackness, a shape that was rapidly growing from a small shadow into a terrifying, mountainous presence. Then his training and instinct took over. He reached for the heavy brass bell above his head and struck it 3 times, the sharp, frantic clang of the metal, a sudden, piercing alarm that shattered the deep, hypnotic peace of the night. 3 rings, the signal for an obstruction, dead ahead. At the same time, he lifted the telephone that connected the crow's nest directly to the bridge, his voice urgent and strained as the quartermaster answered. "What did you see?" Fleet's reply was stark, breathless, and unforgettable. "Iceberg, right ahead." On the bridge, the response was instantaneous. First Officer Murdoch, who had also just glimpsed the faint shape emerging from the darkness, leaped toward the engine order telegraph, his hand slamming the levers to full astern. It was a desperate, almost hopeless command to reverse the immense forward momentum of the 46,000-ton vessel. In the same fluid, practiced motion, he shouted to the helmsman, Quartermaster Robert Hitchens, "Hard a starboard." This was the counterintuitive order of the time, meaning to turn the ship's tiller to the right, which would, in turn, swing the bow of the vessel to the left. Hitchens threw his entire body weight into the wheel, spinning it with all his strength, and for a few agonizing seconds the great ship seemed to hang, suspended in time, refusing to answer the helm. Then, slowly, majestically, the great bow began to swing, its nose beginning to veer away from the colossal wall of ancient ice that now loomed over the forecastle deck. It seemed, for one fleeting, hopeful moment, that they might just miss it. The ship's bow cleared the edge of the iceberg, a testament to the crew's swift professional reaction. But the Titanic was not a nimble speedboat. It was a behemoth, and its immense length and momentum meant it could not turn on a dime. The great mass of the iceberg, most of its deadly bulk hidden beneath the calm, dark water, was now gliding past the starboard side of the vessel. And then came the sound. It was not the dramatic, explosive crash that one might imagine, but something far more subtle, more insidious. Survivors later described it as the sound of a giant tearing a colossal piece of calico cloth, a long, grinding, vibrating shudder that ran deep into the very bones of the ship. For 37 surreal seconds, the submerged spur of the iceberg scraped and bumped along the starboard hull, a fatal, unthinkable touch between ancient frozen nature and the pinnacle of modern man-made steel. The initial reaction of those who were still awake was not one of panic, but of mild curiosity and confusion. In the first-class smoking room, the card players felt a slight jarring vibration that rattled the glasses on their tables. Some passengers who had been strolling on the enclosed promenade deck saw the immense dark shape of the iceberg glide past their windows, its peak towering above the boat deck, shedding chunks of ice that landed with a soft, strange thud on the forward well deck. Many people who were already asleep in their berths felt nothing at all, or were only momentarily stirred by a sensation no more dramatic than the ship crossing a harbour bar. In a second-class cabin, one survivor recalled feeling a long, grinding smash that seemed to come from far away, deep below. There were no sirens, no chaos, no immediate sense of catastrophe. The great ship simply sailed on, its engines now stopped, gliding to a silent, motionless halt in the vast, icy stillness of the night. A strange, almost dreamlike quiet descended upon the Titanic. The constant, reassuring thrum of the engines, a sound that had been the very heartbeat of the vessel for 5 days, was gone. And in its place, there was only a profound and unnerving silence, broken by the faint, unfamiliar sound of steam venting from the huge funnels, a loud, roaring hiss that echoed across the placid water. For a few minutes, a sense of disbelief prevailed. Passengers emerged from their rooms, some in dressing gowns, asking what had happened. The initial explanations were casual and reassuring. They had grazed an iceberg, nothing more. The ship was unsinkable after all. This was merely an unexpected and perhaps even exciting interruption to their journey. But below the waterline, in the deep, dark and unseen world of the boiler rooms and cargo holds, a different reality was unfolding. The unthinkable touch had not just scraped the ship. It had punctured it, opening 6 of its 16 watertight compartments to the sea. The unsinkable giant was mortally wounded, and a slow, inexorable process had begun. A process that could not be stopped. The night of tranquil elegance was over, and a new, terrifying chapter was dawning, born in a moment of quiet, grinding contact in the deep, silent dark. And so, our journey through the quiet, forgotten hours must come to a gentle close. We have walked the decks of a magnificent vessel, not as it met its tragic end, but as it lived, in its final peaceful moments of grace and serene confidence. We have lingered in the warmth of its grand saloons, listened to the joyful music in its common rooms, and stood a silent watch under a brilliant, star-filled sky. We have revisited a single evening, suspended in time, an evening brimming with the quiet normalcy of life, with all its elegant rituals, its simple comforts, and its vibrant, powerful hopes. Now, let us drift back from that time, carrying with us not the horror of the destination, but the poignant memory of the voyage itself. The story of that night is a quiet tapestry woven from countless small threads of chance and choice. It is a story of what-ifs that echoes softly through the halls of history. What if the seas had been rougher, their white-capped waves revealing the danger sooner? What if a pair of binoculars had been in the right hands at the right time? What if a single, crucial message, plucked from the static-filled air, had completed its journey from the wireless room to the bridge? Each thread is a small human detail, a moment of distraction, an overlooked memo, a minor oversight that, on its own, was insignificant. But together, they wove a chain of events as strong and as inexorable as the steel plates of the ship itself, pulling the grand vessel toward its unforeseen and tragic destiny. The loss that followed was more than just the sinking of a ship. It was the shattering of a beautiful and powerful dream. The Titanic was the ultimate symbol of a confident age, an era that truly believed it had conquered the limitations of the natural world through ingenuity and ambition. It was the embodiment of a faith in progress, in order, and in the reassuring certainty of technology. In the quiet, icy waters of the North Atlantic, that faith was profoundly shaken. The world awoke to a new and humbling reality, a reminder that for all of its magnificent achievements, humanity remained subject to the immense, impartial power of nature, and to the quiet, persistent fallibility that lies within its own heart. The disaster marked the end of a certain kind of innocence, a gentle closing of the door on the long, peaceful summer of the Edwardian age. And for so many aboard that night, it was the end of a deeply personal American dream. The great ship was a vessel of hope, a conduit to a new life. In its ornate staterooms were some of the most prominent American families, captains of industry returning to the nation they had helped to build. And in the crowded, hopeful spaces of steerage were countless souls sailing toward America for the first time, their life savings invested in this single passage, their hearts filled with dreams of the futures they would forge in the cities and on the farmlands of a new world. Their journeys, whether of return or of arrival, were cut short, their stories becoming a part of a larger American narrative of hope, ambition, and profound, heartbreaking loss. Their unfulfilled dreams became woven into the very fabric of the nation's story. Let us leave her there, then, in our thoughts. Not in the chaos and the sorrow of her final hours, but as she was in that last peaceful evening, a majestic, floating city of light, gliding silently upon a sea of glass. Let us remember the soft music of the orchestra, the warm murmur of conversation, the confident, steady pulse of her powerful engines. The Titanic sails on now only in the quiet ocean of our memory, a ghost ship forever voyaging through a single, starlit night. She remains a timeless and poignant symbol, a testament to both the heights of human aspiration and the depths of our shared vulnerability, a beautiful, tragic dream from which the world and all of us would eventually have to awaken. And now, it is time for you too to drift into your own quiet dreams, to let the gentle, rhythmic memory of that distant ocean carry you into a deep and peaceful sleep.